A very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain. So,
just so you know, it's a Monday morning and it's the 19th of September 2022. I'm Ayo Makinde. Good morning and welcome.
Yes, indeed, it's a beautiful day at that. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily on Channels Television. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
So that it might just become our official countdown these days. So I shouldn't bother thinking about what's today's date and time when I get there. You remind me if I get lucky not to miss out on some things while waiting for your reminder. But you know, there's a worrying situation playing out in Jalingo, capital of Taraba State. We understand there's been an explosion in the state capital, and well, it's expected to be a bomb explosion. And now this happened at where they say it's a drinking joint. And usually students converge there among several other people to relax there and hang out. And so that's supposed to be one of the heaviest, most populated areas where they gather in terms of that convergence to meet and then, you know, just hang out and spend time there. And it turns out that this happens to be, from what we understand, the fourth explosion this year. So it raises questions, and from the information we have, they've been targeting those kinds of sit-outs. And then you just wonder, but what really, why, what's going on here? If it's the fourth, what is, because there has to be some explanation about that. But at the moment, the police have cordoned off the area. Many people can't access it as of yet to get us more information. The police themselves have not given us much information other than cordoning off that area, trying to find out what transpired. But it being the very fourth one in a year raises a lot of concerns. So who are those behind it? Why are they targeting those areas? Are they trying to stop people from converging? What message are they trying to pass on? What are the authorities doing about this? Was there intelligence to ensure that this was going to happen? And if not, what is the level? Because look, there are just so many things flowing through, because people just can't afford to keep living or carrying on or going about their activities with this kind of scenario playing out. And so if it is the fourth one, well, it raises a lot of concern. But residents there need to be a lot more concerned. We're waiting for the authorities to speak up on this matter. Why is this going on? So, of course, it means that several other areas that have, or similar areas, if not just this kind of area, all other areas have got to begin to take measures to contribute or do whatever they can to secure their own area, whatever they can to get information, you know, closed circuit monitoring, whatever it is, such that they can get something, because the authorities, they need to work with something. And perhaps one might as well just say here, look, if anyone knows anything, you know, you need to go forward and speak to the authorities, guys.
Well, you know, what is of concern, one of the things that is of concern here is something that we all know, which is the fact that Taraba State is a northeastern state. And if we know the things that have been happening in Taraba State over time, then one needs to begin to ask, in the northeast of Nigeria over time, one may need to begin to ask some questions. Of course, we remember that was just last week we were hearing that, you know, there's been a lot of bombing, you know, of Sambisa forests, which is also in the northeast of Nigeria at the time, and consequently scattering the insurgents all over the place. One then wonders if there is some kind of spillover of of all those activities or not. The current one that we're having now, I mean, Chamberlain, spot on. It's the fourth, you know, in recent time. That raises a lot of questions on its own. And if it happened the first time, we didn't really get any information about it. The second time, we didn't get any information. Third time, and it's all just based on assumptions, and we have to be scavenging for information. It will seem as if we're empowering or emboldening these, you know, miscreants, if one can call them that, to continue to do these things that they shouldn't be doing in the first place. So those questions are there. Now, we know it's only natural to expect that the authorities would be already conducting, you know, investigations now and all of that. But if this is the fourth, is there going to be a fifth? God forbid. But is there? We need to hear from the authorities so that people do not fill gaps that they shouldn't with information that they do not have.
Very valid points you've made there, Ayo, particularly about how investigations are ongoing. And if it's the fourth, questions should be asked about, how investigations are being carried out and what are the outcomes of these investigations. And I just read that, sometime in June, some arrests was made in connection with the bomb explosions in Taraba State. One Bala Usman was arrested by security operatives. We can't say it enough that when arrests are made, somehow it should provide leads as to, sources and sponsors and interested parties about those fomenting trouble, causing insecurity in the state. So when this arrest was made, what were the outcomes? When the individual was interrogated, what were the things that he said or they said that provided leads as to who's sponsoring insecurity in that state? And, it goes to also say that beyond the intensity of, security operations in the Northwest, trying to rein in on banditry, it should also be taken to other regions. The ball must not be dropped where security is concerned. Rather than reactive approaches, there must be proactive approaches as well to tackling insecurity in the country. And, Chamberlain rightly noted there that it was near a drinking joint. So it can't also be said enough that people must now be security conscious. It was not just near a drinking joint. Reports also say that the location was somewhere near the Taraba State University. So people must be made to feel safe in these, challenging times. And, people must be security conscious. You don't have to go out unless it's absolutely necessary. Perhaps, not going out for one drink in a day may be that decision that will save your life. So these are some of the things that one should note at this time. And it's so heartwarming that a toddler that was said to be sleeping nearby a location there somehow was saved, from any life-threatening injury, and in fact, ultimately from death. And according to reports, the toddler is now receiving treatment in the hospital. So the security operatives have their work cut out for them to do something firm and decisive about reining in on those bad elements in Jalingo.
It'll be important, Chamberlain, if you may want to add to it, to even determine exactly, what it was. Was it a bomb? Was it a gas cylinder? Because we will always hear all kinds of things when issues like this arise from time to time. So let the authorities just come out so people do not fill gaps with fake news. Chamberlain.
At the moment, too, the police anti-bomb squad have arrived at the area. They've cordoned off the area. So we're waiting, keeping our ears really close to the ground to ensure that we bring our viewers as much information as we can whenever we get them. So you can see that there's images coming through this morning from Jalingo, capital of Taraba State, where an explosion, suspected to be a bomb explosion, took place. And so we'll bring you more details as we get them. And then speaking of which, globally, it's going to be a significant day today in Europe. In United Kingdom, for instance, it's going to be a bank holiday for the whole of United Kingdom. It's end of an era. And as you may all know, we've been following up on some of those events and scenarios playing out following the death of the Queen. And so there'll be lots of activities lined up, scheduled to go on today. And so that's for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. And so there'll be, for instance, the stock exchange is expected to close for the second time in under 2 weeks. And then at 11 sharp, the Big Ben is expected to chime. The country will fall silent and the coffin will be brought inside Westminster Abbey, where I think about 2,000 specially invited guests will be expected to bow their heads in prayer. And after the service, the Queen will be taken to Windsor Castle and finally at St. George's Chapel. So the Vice President of Nigeria is there, leading Nigeria's team to the funeral. And so there'll be lots of activities and more information that will come through, but some of the other highlights is, for instance, you will expect to see a new British currency that will be printed. The Queen's currency will slowly be removed from use, and the same thing will be expected to apply with stamps, passport, the police, and military uniforms. So there'll be quite a lot that will play out. But I mean, as many of you may already have heard, several people waiting days, we understand, queuing for days just to pay their last respect. So, quite significant. But yeah, you've got divergent views about what is playing out and how that is coming through. But importantly as well, we should also highlight on the programming note, Channels TV will be bringing you live coverage of the Queen's funeral today, Monday, September 19, from both our Lagos and London studios from 10 a.m. today. So you might like to join up on that one as we get you all the information we can concerning the Queen's funeral proceedings. All right, so we'll ride on and take you to the dailies in just a moment. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be another significant day today beyond what we highlighted to you. So much as the heavens opened up here in the nation's capital, but today as well, take a look at Nigerian Tribune, for instance. ASU strike, security on the alert as students insist on protests at airports. So a lot is going on there. Remember that the students held their protest at the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and then there was lots of response concerning the regular people who will feel the brunt, even though they wanted to call attention. But several also thought, well, are they sure that that is the place to do that? But now, look at this. The writer says, Nance warns against attack on students, but the Biamela to meet students tomorrow. So several ways to call attention. And then the industrial court, remember the matter is still there. We're waiting to hear from the authorities to see, will they pull the matter off, will they take it off, withdraw the matter from the industrial court? Because you know the impression, the way it usually is when you take matters to court, people tend to take a hardline stance on the matter. And in some cases, it makes it a lot harder for them to come to some sort of agreement. But now, with this thrown into the equation, how will things play out? So it is a big lead on the front page here today for Nigerian Tribune. But then just above that one, you'll also get to see 7 million Nigerians sue INEC over inability to complete voter registration. That is a lot of numbers. There are 7 million. So perhaps you may want to equally see that story and find out how is it 7 million? Why were they not able to complete it? What stage? Is there anything that can be done about it? So those are several questions that will go through your mind just seeing this. But of course, there are several other headlines, but this one's just people-centric in the manner of speaking. Not that the others are no, but that's Tribune this morning, guys.
All right, I'll segue into your city right now with the Abuja Enquirer, Chamberlain. And what do we have on its front page? Something related to students as well, and it is something that perhaps a number of people might be concerned with as well. Look at it on the front page. Anxiety trails FCT schools resumption. just when we were talking about ASU, I mean, on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune, here's what you have on the front page of Abuja Inquirer. Rural schools not safe. That's ascribed to PTA chairman. No cause for alarm, says FCTA. Engages services of NSCDC vigilantes in rural schools. All of that parked on the front page. That information coming from the PTA chairman, Parents Teachers Association chair, saying that the rural schools are not safe. And of course, the FCTA has responded and shown us what they're doing. So how comforting that is for parents, I guess one will wait to see.
Yes, indeed. And employing a vigilante, for securities, for surveillance in schools, well, that's what these times, compel now. Thinking outside the box in terms of security. Our children must be made to feel safe, The parents must drop them off at school and return to their places of work confident that they have left them in good hands.
And that's for those who can drop their children. How about those who have to walk to school and back home? Anyway, all of that you might pick the details on the front page. Continues on page 3. Right under the nameplate, a number of stories. Let me pick 2. We're working with police, others to stop illegal varsities. That's ascribed to NUC. Find the story on page 10. And 2022 Hajj. 1,584 pilgrims in FCT get refund of excess payments. Should one be asking, how did the excess payment come about in the first place? Anyway, that's the Abuja Inquirer today.
And from the Abuja Inquirer, let's take a very quick look at the Daily Trust newspapers. There are some stories that will interest you this morning from the front page of the Daily Trust newspapers. And the big story is captioned this way: How bandits leader Turji escaped NAF bombings. Let's take a look at the riders. 12 buried fighters, women, 12 buried rather, fighters, women, kids affected. Residents in panic over possible reprisal. And will sustain the tempo, the military says. And you'll find that story on page 4. This obviously is in response to, or a follow-up to, the story from the weekend about how the Sambisa forest has been decimated following intense aerial bombardment by the Air Force, and of course flooding that made the insurgents to become merged somewhere near Lake Chad. And this, as a follow-up, lets us in on the outcomes of that event. Bandit leader Turji escaping. Well, perhaps the most important point from this story is that the residents, the people in that area, are weary of reprisal attacks, and as a result, the intensity of the operations must continue, and the security operatives must do all they can to make the people feel safe. Perhaps, there must also be continued surveillance in that area to ensure that insurgents do not return. But that's cheering news coming in from the weekend about Sambisa Forest. The best news coming from Sambisa Forest in a long time, I guess.
Well, it's cheering that is happening, and of course, the government has said over and over again that the insurgents have been greatly, what's the word you used again? Decimated. So that's that. Is this another sign of that? But then we also know that what has happened over time when they are dispersed from a particular location, they seem to spread themselves around. That's one of the fears that security consultants have discussed with us over time. How significant is that? I guess we'll wait to see.
Indeed, significant also because over the weekend, the Northeast governors, after their security meeting, came out with a communique to say that government should do something urgently because bandits from Northwest are now finding their way into the Northeast. Yep. And we recall that it was, the complaint that, or the analysis that terrorists from the Northeast were finding their way into the Northwest to take up the work of banditry. Interesting. But let's move on with the Daily Trust newspapers. We have this one also. You'll find that just beside the picture on the front page, 19 killed in FCT road crash. And lastly, masquerades invade Plateau Church flog pastor worshippers. That's the Daily Trust newspapers for you this morning.
Well, take a look at leadership newspaper next. 9 days to go. A bit of politics now. APC, PDP, LP, others strategize, fine-tune campaign machineries. My campaign team will lead PDP to victory, ascribed to Atiku. Tambawal's appointment plot against South, says Wike's camp. Tinubu appoints Yaya Bello as youth campaign coordinator. LP to leverage organized labor structure. So you have all of that just playing out. But above that, this lead story here. Strike. Court hears FG suit against ASU today. So quite a number of attention called to ASU at different points. Don't forget that of the students who the dailies report that they will be protesting at airports, trying to take the message to those up there to get to be heard. And so today, you'll also get to hear this one. And while at that, those inflation figures that came through, the Tribune also reported today that 84% of Nigerians can't afford healthy diet. 84%, that is significant. But then you'll also get to see, well, I think this budget story, you see the highlights in some of the other dailies. But that is leadership this morning, guys.
We have the PDP story also on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper, albeit joined with something else. But the lead of the Vanguard newspaper this morning is about business, and it's related to the issue you just mentioned about the fact that purchasing power is coming down. Front page of the Vanguard newspaper. What do you have on its front page? This is it. Businesses heading for total collapse. NECA raises alarm. That story you'll find on page 19 of the paper this morning. Something most certainly, troubling. Says over 50 taxes weighing businesses down. And, we've spoken countless times about the fact that, multiple taxes are killing businesses, but that's what you have on the front page. Once against further borrowing, calls for harmonized tax system, economy facing many vulnerabilities. That's ascribed to Muda Yusuf. Let there be tax harmony, says FIRS boss. Again, the details are on page 19. That PDP story right there. Campaign council, PDP's move puts APC under pressure. What does that mean? Well, it's politics. Find the details on page 6 of the Vanguard newspaper. Back page has sports, lots of them. But Mr. and Mrs., and then we move on. Mrs. literally protesting as Mr. ties or knots his tie. Mrs. says, by now, I should own a car. It's not nice for me to do nothing when you warm your car every morning. Mr. calmly responds, you can warm the soup.
Mr. is not nice this morning. Not nice at all.
Not to do nothing. She didn't say it. So,
Mr. should buy her a car. Let's move forward as we look at the Guardian newspapers this morning. The Guardian newspapers leads with this one. Last mile infrastructure stalls $3 billion submarine cable investment. And you find the riders, despite over 50 TB bandwidth capacity, varsities, airports, hospitals yet to connect, Infracorps reluctant to move to site despite NCC directive. Lack of counterpart funding will stall service expansion, say experts. FG commits to 390 per gigabyte, 390 naira per gigabyte by 2025 as competition drags service. NCC assures underserved areas of broadband availability. That's the big story on the front page of the Guardian this morning. I imagine this would have a lot of implications on telecommunication services, but you'll find that story on page 6 of The Guardian. It continues on page 6 on The Guardian, where you get all of the details about the submarine cable investment. Let's go above the nameplate. Beneath the nameplates now, you find these two stories. World stands still today for historic Queen's funeral. It's also on page 6. Indeed, it's the end of an era, and it's going to be a momentous occasion today in the United Kingdom. And this one says, Kogi Governor Bello appointed National Youth Coordinator of Tinubu Shetima campaign. That's on page 23 of the Guardian newspapers. That's the Guardian newspapers for you this morning.
Take a look at the Daily Times next here. Well, the lead story on the front page is different from the ones you've seen previously. So, NAS to amend Finance Act again. That's the kicker there being 11.03 trillion naira 2023 budget deficit. So all eyes will be on the National Assembly concerning this one today. And then you see the rider, tomorrow's resumption date for lawmakers doubtful, ascribed to Senator Musa. So, and then at the bottom straight, Nigeria hosts Global Investment Forum in New York. And then, while at that, NLC is reiterating their position on removal of petrol subsidies. What is the way forward? How can that be? Plans to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty attainable, ascribed to federal government. So they need to speak a lot more about this. So when that was said by the president, you thought you were going to get at least more or less like regular briefing concerning what's happening, where are we, how. So, but this happens to be one of the most recent comments about it. Plans to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty attainable. So, make of that what you will. Catholic bishops task INEC on technology deployment for 2023 polls. That also features there. So that is Daily Times today.
You know, the issue you raised, Chamberlain, about government saying it's attainable for us to raise 100 million Nigerians out of poverty is actually, you know, something that can be done, but cannot be done by just the federal government because people live in state and in rural areas. I hope that's also been factored in. Nigerian News Direct this morning perhaps gives us something else. Trust in public institutions to reduce election costs. That's ascribed to the INEC chairman. Of course, that story is about 305 billion naira budgetary allocation, perhaps for the election. Find out the details on page 2 of the paper this morning. Calls for collective support to tackle underage voting. Perhaps a way of saying, we know this happens. How does that happen? Underage voting. How has it ever happened? How is it gonna be addressed now with BVAS and other technological equipment being factored in? Wait a minute, how come the security agencies, didn't they see that the underage voting was happening? Hey, I'm getting ahead of myself. So.
You get a lot of how comes, Ayo. So yeah. Just continue.
Okay, right on that picture, the big picture you see on the front page, 2023. 2022 Electoral Act will make rigging impossible. That's ascribed to elder statesmen. The details you'll find on the inside pages of the paper this morning.
And from Nigerian News Direct, let's quickly take a look at the New Telegraph this morning. And it also leads with the 2023 election. And it's captioned this way: 2023, 24 Nigerians sue INEC over incomplete registration. The riders go thus: pray that they, 7 million others, be allowed to get PVCs. Vote. Say closing gates on eligible citizens can't preserve trust in electoral process. Catholic bishops task INEC on tech deployment for polls. So, how soon will justice be dispensed in this case? How much time does INEC have, if indeed these people get their prayers answered at the courts? How much time does INEC have to conduct the CVR for them, such that they can get their cards?
So it's your turn.
They'll be able to vote.
It's your turn
during
with
the elections.
How elections, right?
Yeah.
How questions.
How questions.
Okay.
Interesting. All right, let's go above the nameplates to take these ones, just two of them, as we've captioned all the other stories from other papers. National Assembly will tackle 11.03 trillion naira 2023 budget deficit via legislation. That's attributed to the Senate President, Hamid Lawan. Reps resume Tuesday to debate water bill, others. Well, as far as deficit in the 2023 budget is concerned, Nigerians will definitely hold the Senate President, this current National Assembly, to account. Let's look at this one before we go. Kachiku is a PDP member blackmailing ADC leaders. That's attributed to Mursu. Well, the politics of 2023 playing out already. That's the New Telegraph newspapers this morning.
And that wraps it up with the papers. Just to quickly mention that the President, Muhammadu Buhari, has arrived in New York via the JFK International Airport at 7:30 p.m. local time to join other world leaders to participate in the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly UNGA. More on that on Channels Television, so stay with us. We're back in a moment. Please stay here.
And just as economists had predicted, Nigeria's headline inflation rate climbed higher to a 17-year high, 19.4% in July, up from 18.60% recorded in June. This is according to the latest report released by the National Bureau of Statistics. The figure, which also marks the sixth consecutive monthly rise in inflation, is 2.27% higher on a year-on-year basis than 17.38% recorded in September 2005. A breakdown of the NBS data shows that Nigeria's urban inflation rate rose by 2.08% to 20.09% in July 2022 from 18.01% recorded July the previous year, while the rural inflation rate jumped from 16.75% to 19.22% on a year-on-year comparison. Both indexes were unchanged within the comparative month. Interestingly, the food inflation rate in July declined by 0.01% to 2.04% in month-on-month contrast against the 2.05% rate recorded in June 2022. And this is attributed to a reduction in the prices of basic food items such as gari, yams, maize and vegetables. Similarly, food inflation over the previous 12-month period dropped by average 1.42% to 18.75% from the average annual rate of 20.16% recorded in July 2021. The economic interpretation of the rising inflation number means that Nigerians are not able to purchase as much goods and services with their monies, as the value of their income has been eroded due to rising costs.
All right, welcome back. So to just shed some light on what you just seen, Dr. Emeka Okegu, a development specialist, joins us here in the studio. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today. Well, that certainly will worry anyone, concern lots of people, how those indices just seems to be going south. But from what you've seen over time, as a matter of fact, these figures have appeared to consistently go that way. But why is this the case, in spite of the policies that the authorities have put in place?
I'm glad you mentioned the word policy. What about the programs? What about the actions?
Two different things there, right?
Yes, no, three different things.
Oh.
Because you're talking about policies. Policies would become your wish list. Okay, then the programs will become, the process, and the actions now becomes, now engaging that process. So if you look at this thing purely from the perspective of policy, then we'll still be dancing around the bonfire. Okay, but the moment you get into program and action, then you begin to probably think out of the box. You begin to get a little bit innovative. You begin to get a little bit disruptive. So what should worry us is, why are we focused on the old ways? Okay, because like you journalists will say, you do the same things over and over again, and you want to expect a different result. That's not going to be, a yes, it will be a nay. So for me, first and foremost, we should be glad that we are not even talking about a stagflation or a depression, because, that would be how I would see it. Okay, because if you're looking at these figures being banded, remember you're just talking about the formal economy.
Yeah.
We've not even taken a look at the real sector, at the underground economy, at the informal sector. And this is where about 80 or 70% at least of Nigerians live. And you're talking about rural inflation at 19%, which is statistics. Remembering again that one of the major causes of even the formal, economy entering into this high inflation is because people are not going to the farms, and the farms are in the rural areas. So do you have rural industries? Do you have energy? Do you have support infrastructure? So I think we're just being a little bit superficial about this. And for me, again, it begs for that question: have we gotten to where we have our backs against the wall? Is it time for us to begin to push back?
And speaking about the informal sector, I know that there's that conversation which has happened time and again, and perhaps may keep happening, how they want to formalize that informal sector. Are we able to get a proper reading of the informal sector?
Now, who wants to do this? Who wants to do this formalization? Remembering that you have 3 levels of government. Okay, is this a federal government program? Is it a state government program? Is this a local government program? Or is this a national program? You see, Chamberlain, we need to interrogate these things a little bit deeply, because if you look at the way we share our resources, the resources of Nigeria is actually being shared across these 3 sectors. And then let's interrogate the economic sustainability plan. Whose program was it? And then how does the land in your village connect to the program of Ministry of Agriculture? How do the farmers, what do we have our National Food Security Program? Because one of the major indices, remember, of this inflation is food. Okay, high cost of, are we producing food? Are we really a food production nation? Do we have the capacity to produce? Have we been able to engage those capacities? Or do we just have people who are, doing pedestrian agriculture, if you remember, pedestrian gardening? Because if you're talking about food production for a country of 200 million people, there's no way you won't be talking about technology.
And then speaking about that in agriculture, you talk about policies not being disjointed, that if they have that proper coordination, then you could speak about having the kind of desired effect that you do want. But we also do know, when they talk about some of these policies, you hear the CBN talk about their own intervention programs, the Ancoboros program and several other programs. You hear different state governments saying they've keyed in to that CBN's program at the national level, bringing it out to the states, and how they give the impression that it's having that effect at the state level. But now, still food inflation. So what could have gone wrong?
I think the problem is the word key in. Key in means you've joined, right? Let's be elementary. Okay, when I keyed into your thoughts or your program, it simply means as a program you've announced and I think I like it and I've keyed in. But why don't we all talk about it, think about it, and then begin to juxtapose, against statistics? Let's get mathematical, all right? If you have, like we claim we have, 83 million hectares of land arable, and we are claiming or saying that less than 10% of it is in production. Now, how come we are not now making certain that we have a program that can put at least 50% of that 83 million or 73 million hectares of land into production by doing A, B, C? A, what can grow here? Yeah. What volume of land do you need? What volume of apples do you need? Who is bringing the land? The state governments now say, okay, we are going to be bringing 10,000 each for the cultivation of cowpea. The research centers now say we are able to produce the seeds, insecticides, pesticides, fertilizers to be able to support this. Then you're not keying in Okay, you have everybody on that table, okay, bringing something to the party, and it becomes a lot easier for you to now develop your KPIs, for you to be able to now, measure. And then you talk about central bank waking up and saying, okay, we're going to be throwing, and then they say to you, for you to qualify to get this loan, okay, you need to get a bank to borrow on your behalf. So you don't even have any patient capital. You don't even have any green funds. You don't even have any component of these funds helping you to do your R&D. You don't even have any of these helping you to do your feasibilities. And again, Chamberlain, it's not even enough for you to do feasibility. You need to take it to bankable feasibility. Who pays this cost? There's no funding window in our country that's able to support your thought lines. I mean, you've been on television and you've spoken to every manner of persons. So I can imagine that you have so great thoughts. But if you are to translate this into some kind of actionable program, there won't be anybody to fund it. Except, of course, you now go outside to start looking for grants. We don't have any grant programs in Nigeria. But now, these are the issues.
Are we discountenancing some of those? I mean, there's some industry banks that several people go to, and they get facilities in some of those.
They give you loans, and they give you loans, Chamberlain. That's the point. None of them will fund your feasibility, and some of the times these feasibilities take a lot of time and energy and money. And
is that speaking to banks performing some what we can call the core functions to ensure that industries, ideas from the very basics are funded up until a very high stage?
We don't even have banks that can do that by their licensing regimes. What you have, are money deposit banks, okay, that lend you money against what they call a feasibility. Now, because you don't have anybody who can help you fund that feasibility, 80% of the times you cut and paste, you ask Google, you put something together. And that is why the banks would say to you, bring 150% of the value of the money we want to give to you because of forced sale values. And then what are you doing with forced sale values? The idea is not to take your property and sell. The idea is for you to be able to contribute to the national food chain. So it's important to recognize where these gaps are from. Okay, and then the moment you recognize it, bridging it becomes a lot easier for us to do.
Well, we'll look at some of the statistics in rice. I know that there's always been that breakdown when you talk about states just keying in, but you wanted to see results. But they've consistently also told us about how we're performing in that area, how we're nearing self-sustainability. I know you may have seen some of the figures that have been put out time and again from the one of Kebbi, 3.5 million metric tons, Jigawa, 2.1 metric tons, Kano, 1.6, Benue, Ebonyi, 1.5. Several figures about how well they say that the figures are looking in that industry. So is that something that you can rely on?
Okay, let's drill it down. Let's assume that we're producing 20 million metric tons of rice annually. How many tons of rice does a family consume in a year? That's only when you can talk about this self-sufficiency. Okay? And how affordable is this rice? Remember that when we're importing, we're buying at 7,000, 8,000. We're self-sufficient and we're buying at 18,000. And our, what do they call it now? Basic income is 18,000 and you're buying rice at 28.30. How does that make it self-sufficient? Because self-sufficiency connotes that is affordable for everybody and every layer on every cadre or strata of citizenry. So I think what's important is that, yes, when we can say we're producing 80 million, how much do we have in our silos? Well, how much are in your strategic reserves? Because you only get self-sufficient. I mean, there are countries, that have rice that are shipping to us that are 10 years in their holds. Most of the rice we're importing, from Malaysia and the Asian Pacific, have been in their holds for 10 years. Now we have 400 million metric tons capacity of silos. How much do we have in there? That's when you can begin to talk about self-sufficiency. It has to do with your strategic reserves and not your production.
All right, let's get to our colleagues in Lagos. They've got questions for you.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Doc, let me begin by asking you, are you surprised by the figures that came from the NBS? This, we understand, is a 17-year high. These inflation figures. Does the data surprise you?
Not in the list. Not in the list. In fact, I'm even surprised is just 21.52. It doesn't surprise me. And I look at the reasons that they gave. A country that is losing the amount of oil we're losing on a daily basis, we're not going back to the farms, okay? And then you have insurrections and insurgencies, and you have, a major source of maybe what you call the most important staple in Nigeria, wheat, coming from Ukraine and Russia,
okay,
and even our energy needs. So it doesn't surprise me, and that's why I said to Chamberlain, I just hope this is an inflation. What I see is stagflation. Maybe going towards a depression. Because if you're not able to produce food, and then the geezer is laying your eggs is Thai food, people are stealing it dry. How won't you get into a stagflation?
Now, the way you put it, Doc, only tells me one thing, that you wouldn't be the only person that has seen it coming. A number of other economists have also said, look, we are not surprised that this is happening. We saw it, coming. I assume that government also saw it coming. Could it have been avoided?
Yes, it could have been avoided if we got innovative. It could have been avoided if we stopped looking at food production as an agriculture thing. It could have been avoided if by now we had our research institutes producing greenhouses. It could have been avoided if we had every space, looking at urban agriculture. It could have been avoided if we had gotten our universities, most of them that were self-sufficiency in food production, to get engaged. It could have been avoided if we had, this round table where everybody was bringing something. Some people bringing land, some people bringing, human capital, some people bringing funds. It could have been avoided if we had aligned our fiscal policies with our monetary policies. The CBN and the Ministry of Finance and every other revenue agency would have been on a table, Now, looking at volumes, we should have been able to now put minimums. That's the point I'm making. What minimum volume of cowpea do we need to be able to be sufficient for everybody to afford it, for it to be affordable?
Okay.
So a lot of these things could have been avoided if the federal government, had probably stepped down a little bit to now say, okay, it's not about keying in, it's not even about buying in, it's about thinking it through together.
Okay. Well,
okay, all of us should have been on the same table now saying, okay, we'll have a national crisis. Well, so let's think it through.
And that's where one of the challenges, arises, Dr. Kengu, because we've heard over and over again, several people from several quarters say there is a disconnect among the ministries, departments, and agencies. And dare I say, from what you have also said, among the states. You mentioned the Economic Sustainability Plan, and what we understand from that plan is that there's supposed to be a significant partnership with the states in order for it to work. How significant is that in all of this? The fact that MDAs are said to not be working together, and that the states themselves it seems like government is just sending them information of what to do and not really coming into the pool to have these conversations, in the light of the fact that, as you said, it's the states that have the agricultural lands.
Again, there's even a major component you missed out. The central bank didn't even fund the ESP. I think at one time, either they withdrew their funding or they started making demands against the release of your funding. Okay, that was also a very major, and that's what I was talking about, aligning our fiscal and monetary policies. All right, so it's, for me, there are agencies in this country. I can tell you this, I'm involved in a program, and we're trying to do, some kind of, statistics on agencies or companies, that produce greenhouse. Everybody is going the way of greenhouse now. A lot of countries that have, gotten food sufficient have gone food sufficient by not doing rain-fed. Everybody is going, technology-assisted food production. This might shock you. There's no company in this country, producing greenhouses. I mean, the only agency, that I know that has a program like that is PRODA in Enugu, and it is very poorly funded. Okay, so imagine if you had 1 million greenhouses, 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 or 50 in every local government producing tomato. Do you know what will happen? Producing pepper, producing chilies, producing veggies. Look at, man, we have 2 million children from the last report of UNICEF that are malnourished, and about 45% of women under in childbearing age, also facing malnutrition. And this is so because we're not growing food. We don't have to grow food, in the soil. That's the point I'm trying to make, sir.
Okay, well, perhaps that also raises, just 1 second, perhaps that also raises another crucial issue here. Just 1 second. The fact that, I mean, you have mentioned the figures now, malnutrition figures and you know, the possibilities, things that the states themselves could have done. Do the states need to wait for the federal government to catalyze and ramp up their agricultural activities?
You see, when you look at the exclusive list and what the exclusive list also says, it begins to now show you where you have these rough edges that we need to smoothen. Okay, when you also look at, you know, the relationship, the funding relationship in some things, agriculture is seen, you know, as an exclusive right of the federal government. Yes, states are supposed to be involved. In the days we were self-sufficient, we didn't have the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. Please go and check the records. Okay, and then when you have a Federal Ministry of Agriculture holding on to the ministry, holding on to the policy, holding on to the programs, and then you have states who are holding on to the land, there's a disconnect, obviously. Okay, so you don't now, you know, get those people to key into your projects. You get to sit down with them, you know, to have some kind of disruptive conversations to say, okay, this is where are we matching our population against this? Where are we matching our nutrition, you know, programs against this? And a lot of these federal agencies, by law, can't even commercialize their outputs. That's another very major challenge. And this is why you have the Nasenis and you have the Prodas and you have the SEDIs and you have all these, you know, developing technologies, and they can't market. So where do you begin to build these synergies? And what should even worry us is that we're talking about a country that has 83 million hectares of land arable. Okay, getting imports from Ukraine that is half that size in the whole population of Ukraine, I think about 20 million hectares or so in production, and just a war between them and Russia, you have this global, you know, supply crisis. That should worry us.
Indeed, it should, Dr. Okengo, and you rightly touched on malnutrition. There was a report from one of the dailies today that talked about 84% of Nigerians being unable, you know, to feed properly. That's a very scary number. In responding to, you know, some of Chamberlain's questions, you raised a lot of questions about how state governments have keyed into the CBN's intervention programs or otherwise. So, and it begs the question, really, when you hear the figures about the CBN's intervention programs in agriculture, you know, particularly when they justify their decision to raise interest rates, these figures run into billions of naira. Are you also placing a question mark on the far-reaching or the wise nature of these agriculture intervention programs in states of the Federation?
Well, I've never been a fan of interventions. Okay, I rather we intervene socially. Okay, develop soup kitchens, you know, intervene rightly. But if you must intervene in anything that is entrepreneurial, you must think it through. Okay, thinking it through means that you must be able to develop a document that assures that whatever funds you put in there are returned either by way of equity or by way of your, you know, investments. Either you get it by return on equity or you get it by return on investments. Now, but that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is that CBN is providing money, putting it into the hands of banks, and then asking you to go to your banks to apply to CBN, and CBN guarantees these banks maybe about 85% if you lose the money or whatever. Now, you can lose all that money, and the banks won't even take the risk of even giving you the 15%. That's the truth, except you're able to produce about 150% of the value of the money you're looking for. And this is, again, another requirement of CBN. So do we need to do that when we can actually now help to do this land delineation, land identification, seeds identification, soil preparation, okay, and then be able to now get people who are knowledgeable to be able to give you support to these programs. And then you have a target going towards a national yield. You keep talking about states. States don't borrow money directly. It's the business in the states that take. So what CBN tells is that, okay, from Ogun State, we are supporting X. From Abia State, we are supporting B. From this, the only time I think they intervened directly was, I think, in the 2025, 2015, I don't know what program they called it now, but I think every state got about, you know, 2 billion. And again, I wouldn't know how that went, but I don't think it went so well.
So Doc, how can this process be made more accountable?
Simple, very simple, ma'am. You make it accountable by making certain that whoever is getting the money is not getting it because he's able to guarantee it. He's getting it because he has the requirements to be able to get it. Requirement number 1 will be land. Requirement number 2 will be skill. Requirement number 3 will be inputs. Requirement number 4 will be where his markets, where this is where government can now guarantee. This is where the subsidies are actually coming. You know, like in the days we had the commodity boards where, you know, government now ensured that whatever was produced was bought up. This is where the CBN can actually intervene. And then we can begin to now have what we call this bulk that can now begin to support our industries. But for that to happen, you have to have storage. You have to have transportation. You have to have energy, okay? And then, of course, most of all, you have to have your market. So if you don't have all these things worked out and they say, okay, we're intervening, let's be able to now, it becomes throwing fire, throwing kerosene into a fire. You know, 80% of the times, it only worsens it. You understand? You might get some little piece, some little leverage out of 1 million people, 10 or 2 might say to you, okay, we've gotten something. But it doesn't solve the problem on a sustainable basis. So if we are to think this through, and that's what's very critical, that's what I don't think we are doing well. Okay, if we are to think this through, the first question will be, like I said, how many tons of pepper do we consume in Nigeria every day? Just like we're talking about the PMS we consume, we should be able to know other commodities and then where they're coming from and how we can be able to, you know, ramp up production. Vis-a-vis, are we using technology? Are we using land? Are we using rain-fed? Are we using farmers? Are we using what? That's the way to go, ma'am.
Yeah, a lot of work there, but if it's thought through and implemented, it will go a long way. Before leaving the CBN, let's not look at the MPR meeting. You know, in the past, when inflation figures were released and we had this same narrative, the monetary policy meeting would justify its decision to raise interest rates. But then again, we're back here in September, and inflation has gone up again. What do you see happening at this next meeting that is scheduled for the end of the month, and would it help to stem the rising inflation?
I think we're between the rock and the hard place now. Remember that America has also raised its own interest rates, and America has had 2 consecutive negative growth, meaning that technically America is in a recession. The euro and the pounds for the first time is doing very badly against the dollar, and we are part of this global mix, right? If they raise it, you know, it's like there's this story about the vulture and his pregnant wife. That's actually where we are now. Vulture says, my wife has a baby, I celebrate. Baby dies, I eat the baby, I celebrate. My wife and baby dies, I eat baby and wife, I celebrate. So that's where we are now, really. We can only, for those who can pray, pray. For those who can think. But I think instead of praying, we should think more. And what we need to do, you raise it, you don't raise it. If you don't get us into productivity, and getting us into productivity is not talking about us getting into productivity, it's walking the talk. And walking the talk means that we need to go and redesign, look at how we run our things, and then, you know, scale on some things that we're doing. We need to begin to now have a single track, multi-dimensional approach to solving our national problems, because no matter how much the federal government wants to do, if the local governments, which are the most important component, are not directly involved in it, you're just going to be having some disruptions.
And you have rightly noted that the U.S. is in a technical recession. Speaking of which, a World Bank study revealed that, you know, increase in interest rates by central banks across the globe may lead to a recession. Is that where we are headed? And what picture are you looking at if we're headed for a recession as well?
I'm very glad if we can end up at the recession level. I'll be very, very excited. Let's pray for recession, because against that, we are going straight into a depression. And, you know, the problem is that people don't see the social factors. I mean, the churches will now need to ramp up, you know, on intervening, because there's going to be a lot of mental health issues. Okay, the government will need to start looking at some social policies that they need to help. Now, this is the time for the government to begin to get a little bit let's wipe that human face now, because there'll be increase in school fees, there'll be increase in bus fares, there'll be increase in everything. So you need to also be careful when you're interacting with people now, because you could just say good morning and somebody gives you a slap. Okay, that's where we're going. Unfortunately, it sounds theoretical, but that's the truth. Okay, and if you notice it in the past few days, if you're driving, there's a lot of road rage. Okay, people are getting a lot more impatient with each other. So I think government should look at these things. Yeah, they're real. And I'm talking about those who are in the probably what we call the middle income. And well, just what about those who are living in the informal sector? Those who can't go to their farms, those you can't send money to anymore. Okay, I don't know. I'm certain that as you're in this studio now, open your phones, people are asking you not for a lot of money, 5,000, 2,000. These are people that used to dash you money before. That's how bad it is. So these are going to be the very, very obvious, very, very plain, aftershocks.
One of the most shocking things so far, about this matter is that there is inflation in the rural areas where the foods come from. No, not much wonder then that what's happening in the major towns. But we'll speak more on that and a number of other things when we return from this break. Please stay with us.
Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, Dr. Kengu, talking about, yes, we've seen all these challenges, but let's attempt to see if we could just proffer some solutions as to what can be done, because definitely we can't get out of these things. Now, demand pull inflation is what comes to mind largely when people talk about inflation, and several people have suggested different reasons. So there's a school of thought that thinks, look, that to get us out of this, it will require what they refer to as contractionary monetary and fiscal policy. Some say, look, for instance, if CBN raises the MPR, the banks will in turn make it costlier to borrow. And so when that happens, it keeps money out of circulation, and so people can be encouraged to save. You get a lot more interest on savings, and so that could contribute to mopping up and then addressing this demand pull inflation. Will that work for you?
Well, like I said, the devil is in the word borrow. There is nothing wrong with borrowing, but you need to borrow right. Okay? And borrowing right means that you have the right knowledge, the right skills, the right markets to be able to make certain that you can return the money you borrowed. So you can repay. Now, this is where we have a very big gash, right? Now, you also have a lot of agencies of government that are doing stuff, developing technologies, acquiring technologies, and they are not able to commercialize these technologies. All right? Now, you also have a lot of people who have lands inherited by their parents, farmers who are in the village, and then you have some other guys who just come into town dressed like the way you're dressed. They have cooperatives, they speak good English, and then they say, okay, we're cooperative this, cooperative A. Now, they have the kind of requirements to get those loans. They get the loans and they misapply it. Okay? So, you talked about this synergy between the fiscal and the monetary. Yes, we have to close ranks. But in closing those ranks, I think we should be able to focus on the most critical component that we need, and it is land. The moment you're able to delineate your land and then, segregate what you need for what. Okay, just like in the days you had the farm settlements. Okay, what government did was to carve out these areas, and for each farm settlement, you could predict what was going to be coming out of it. Now, if you borrowed against such a program, you can now have an idea of how much you can get back. Now, because of high interest, rates I've talked about, people borrow and they go into trading. So instead of now applying the money into production, they put it into now, trading.
If you say they borrow and then they misapply it,
yes,
but aren't there supposed to be those procedures wherein they have to vet properly such that before they give you any of those facilities, they are sure that it's not going to bad.
There are two ways you borrow. There's what they call the cash flow based projections, okay, where your cash flow is the basis of lending you money. Yeah. This is where that happens. But what we basically do in Nigeria is that we borrow, against, you being able to secure the loan. All right, so the moment you give that security and somebody is holding on to your land, and again, there's a value of 150% on what you're giving. So it could be your father's estate, and you're looking for 200 million, and then you get somebody to value it at 2 billion. They give you 200 million for something that is worth 2 billion with a first sale value of worth 50 million. Why do you want to bother me? Do you understand? So what we need to do is to, like I said, it's not difficult to solve our problems if we are mathematical and statistical. I think the first thing is that we don't have the proper statistics. There's a lot of assumptions, a lot of presumptions, okay, of what's happening. Now, when you go to the rural areas, I give you a typical example with informal sector, or maybe what you might even call an underground economy. How come it is the people who are in the BDCs, okay, that determine the real cost and value of, forex? How come?
What is missing there?
Because we don't have production. If we had production, then they won't be there.
So the demand for forex will not be...
No, the demand for goods will not be driven, and that is what will give your currency value. Remember that at one time, everybody keeps talking about when Naira was exchanging 70 kobo to $1. What were we doing?
We had a lot of...
we had goods, and these guys were ready to come in here. I mean, as a student, I spent Naira in London, which, then it was 7,000 or so. And there was a student rebate on Nigerian Airways. So if we're not able to understand where we went wrong, we had everybody producing here. We had Lena shoes, we had Bata shoes, we had our refineries working, we had, Nesco producing biscuits. And because we had these farms, they were supplying them. I know one of my friends who is Igbo. His father used to supply grains to Jos Mills. Today, that thing is taking his name. Everybody calls him Babasuwa or something. So until we think this properly through, and it is not all about saying the federal government has done well or it hasn't. It's all about saying, okay, fine, even if you have done well, let's be able to now all sit together and try to identify these gaps. Because we're heading to these headwinds, okay? We keep flying across it, throwing money, borrowing more money. Again, maybe the issues of subsidy should come in now. And I keep saying subsidy is a production instrument. If you're not producing, you can't give subsidy. You can't subsidize what you're not producing. The moment you subsidize what you're importing, it becomes price differential.
So should we be encouraged when they say that, look, the refinery will come on stream by December this year? So when that comes, it will largely address some of these challenges that we face today.
Well, who owns the refineries and at what cost are you producing? Why are we not talking about CNG? Why are we not talking about hydrogen cell fuels? Why are we not talking about solar?
So we shouldn't start from a low-hanging fruit?
No, the lowest hanging fruit is CNG. That's the lowest hanging fruit. The CNGs cars are all over the place. We are flaring 2.2 billion. Remember that part of what is creating this crisis in Europe is gas. And this is also flaring, 2.2 billion COVID,
Yes, well, that's on the one hand.
Yes.
But if the Port Harcourt refinery comes on stream this year,
yes,
what will it address?
It mightn't address a lot of the factors because it won't still bring down the cost of production, except you bring down the cost of your crude. Because remember that your price.
Wouldn't it free up a lot of the demands for forex?
No, because remember that the crude doesn't belong to you technically. It's important to tell this truth. Okay, that's the truth.
Well, how do you say it doesn't belong?
How does it belong to you? Do you own Mobile? Do you have any shares in Mobile?
If we refine the crude here,
yes,
that takes away.
Beautiful. You're going to be buying from who is now producing it. Chamberlain, that's the unfortunate truth, but that's the truth. We are an oil producing nation, okay, but we don't produce the oil for our nation. Because you see, what you had when they were doing this, everybody was coming in to take oil. You had, national oil companies who had multinational oil corporations. And maybe the PIA will address it in the next 20 years, who knows? But right now, there's no move to show you that we're about to now get self-sufficient in, first and foremost, what you call the recount. Okay.
Well, I know that the cost supply side of the inflation is one of the hardest to address compared to the demand pool. But If you were to suggest, I know several people have said, look, we need to get some of these policies right, that if we do, we don't need to focus on some of those high-sounding programs that we need to achieve to get us somewhere out. That if we just put in place one or two policies, you could get some results.
I agree.
If you were to recommend one or two, what would that be?
Food production. Second one, more food production. Third one, food production. And I tell you a story.
But food production has a chain.
That's what I'm saying. So the moment you have that food production, you have now unlocked a chain that is endless. Hear me? I mean, from potato, they are getting practically everything. Everything. From canning industries to transport industries to energy industries to distribution industries to everything, just from one product, potato. So the moment you get self-sufficient in food, let me tell you, the greatest security you don't want to joke with is food security. All right? Because it begins to unlock your technology, it begins to unlock your skills, it begins to unlock everything.
Is it that there is nothing for us to leverage it? Because, I mean, even last week, I think it was Cross River State government that was talking about this, they call it vitamized rice, which is also going to add to our rice production capacity such that it will help or contribute, they say, to reducing the price of rice in the market. So that's one state alongside several other states. And they're going to have that kind of impact with the private sector.
Cross River is a very good example of somebody who is very forward-looking. Okay, like him or dislike him, Ayade is forward-looking. I've been there. I've seen some of the things he's tried to do. Okay, if we had, as a country, understood his superhighway, he was supposed to be unlocking an agricultural belt. A lot of people do not know that Cross River borders Taraba, that you can actually get from Yobe to the sea through that, superhighway in less than 9 hours. People don't know that the other side of Cross River is actually Taraba State. You can actually walk from Cross River into the northern part of the country. So it's all about us now reconnecting the belt. Now, Cross River can only do it for Cross River, and it becomes a Cross River thing. If I get my statistics right again, I think they also have a 50,000 bed poultry systems. Okay, but you're not able to support this again if you don't have the back end and if you don't have the front end. What would the back end be? It will be the proper technologies. Okay, the front end will be your proper, off-takers. If you have us producing that amount of chicken and then you're not tying it to even the National School Feeding Program, you're not tying it to prison programs. If our company had contracts, okay, to supply food to kids in school, people in prison, they can be able to borrow money. Now, this is where the borrowing will be right.
Let's wind out with this. And this appears to be something that may have been going under the radar, the importance of human capital.
Yes.
We know that there's a lot of brain drain in different sectors of the economy. You talked about getting loans and misapplying loans. So you need the requisite skill, knowledge, and the manpower to ensure that you stem that tide. Should we be concerned about what's happening lately with that?
We are very, very concerned. And I tell you, because we're winding down, we're trying to do something with some of the universities in Nigeria. We're trying to get them to begin to get every undergraduate to get a skill. Every. I mean, if your son was reading engineering, why won't you learn how to repair car engines? They're not the same thing. Okay, why won't he learn how to fix electric bulbs or whatever? So everybody should get a skill, down to your certificate or certification or degrees. Now, we need to get back our skill centers, and you have so many of them abandoned all over the place. We need to begin to retool, but you don't retool against assumptions. You retool against needs. So in this place, we have these needs. We train nurses, somebody takes them. We train doctors, somebody takes them. We don't want to. At my age, trust me, if I had an opportunity, I'd leave, but I'm deciding I'm going to be here.
How is that work coming on? Because, for instance, I know that if there are different ways to apply that, I mean, getting the skill, different professions can also key into that such that they just leverage or get, in fact, let's hear from you. How is that coming on at the moment?
It'd be beautiful. In fact, we're getting them to it. The university is bought into one of the major universities in Nigeria has bought into it. We're also talking to even skilled, the guy who fixes, I drive a Mercedes, is so good. And I'm saying, okay, you're going to be taking a class. and you're going to be teaching undergraduates. The guy nearly started crying. He says, me, teach undergraduates? I said, yes. And the little test runs we've had is been amazing. Look at the cameras you have here. We should be able to, train technicians to not only just fix these cameras, to even begin to put them together, because you're basically talking about screens.
Because that was one of the examples I was going to give, actually,
Yes,
because what we find out in schools these days is that the theories are not applicable to practice, because what you see in some of the other Western countries is the exact same items that you're using professionally is what they use in school, such that when they leave, they fit in seamlessly. And so if that gap can be bridged, it will be very easy.
No, we're doing that. We're doing that. And I tell you something, I usually tell the people I teach, in the university, I'm an associate lecturer. I say, listen, Gucci didn't go to school, but everybody is proud to wear a Fendi. These are people who didn't go to school. These are people who are just gifted. They are tailors, call them what they are, but they now put that thing, put a brand on it. And then what do? They get guys like you, good-looking guys, to wear their suits, and then somebody is looking at good-looking Chamberlain, and now you're celebrating the Fendi. So you take your looks, to sell a product. Now this is the new engineering that we must begin to promote in the country, and we have so much that can.
Well, I think it's a good place to let it go, because we need to do things differently, and not. Yes, the government has to come up with policies, but as you highlighted it, there's some things too that can come from bottom up, such that it can now that handshake across board to get the kind of results that we do need. And I'd like to say well done.
Thank you so much.
All the best on that one. And thank you for coming on this morning as well.
Thanks, It's a pleasure.
Dr. Emeka Okengu is a development economist. We will be back in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, we've got Gbeide Faluyi Isibo, who is the Director of Mobilization Nigeria Diaspora Youth Coalition, but he's here in the studios. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, let's get a little bit of background. This Nigerian Diaspora Youth Coalition, now we understand what is it about in the first place, because how is it that it says Youth Coalition for Peter Obi?
Well, the Nigerian Diaspora Youth Coalition, it's a congregation of young professionals who are Nigerians but who live in the diaspora, to promote good governance and to help sustain the development of good governance back at home. That's basically what we do. But putting into consideration all the actors for the 2023 presidential elections, we came to the conclusion that if we are to pursue and encourage good governance, Mr. Peter Obi of the Labour Party happened to be the only candidate that we perceived can align with our goals and our vision as a coalition, and we decided to support him.
Well, first of all, how do Nigerians living abroad contribute to good governance or have any role to play in the elections here?
Well, Nigerians living abroad are Nigerians. They have family members who live in Nigeria, and just like every Nigerian, they feel the impact of bad governance, in Nigeria. In the last 3 years, Nigerians in diaspora have contributed over $60 billion in remittances to the Nigerian economy. That's a very significant amount of money that has helped to improve the GDP of the nation, and so they have a stake in the Nigerian products because they are Nigerians.
Yeah, I understand that. What I'm saying is that because, when that happens, it's not usually, I stand corrected, with the original intention of saying this is to contribute to good governance. It's remitting funds to relatives who want to improve their lives, and by extension, it impacts the economy. So is it right to say that that is with respect to having a direct impact on good governance? Well,
the remittances, like you said, is directly for the benefit of the people who are our relatives. But the vision and the purpose of the NDYC is to promote good governance in Nigeria. So we have sensitization programs in most of the universities in Nigeria. We have trainings we have for young people, in Nigeria to help them, improve their skills and contribute, to the growth and development of the country.
Okay, now, you are still a member of the PDP, are you?
Yes, I am.
But now you're a member of this coalition that you say you're supporting Peter
Peter
Obi.
Obi.
So how does that work? Because I know that if you were living here, you've contested elections before under the platform of PDP.
Yes, I have.
For instance, you know that if you were in that party and you're doing something else for another party, I think you call it anti-party activity. So isn't there a conflict here for you?
No, there's no conflict because I'm a member of the PDP and I'm glad to be a member of the PDP, but I'm one that is very obedient. I call it with a very high obedient voting because this is it.
So that is not anti-party activity?
Well, my loyalty is first to my conscience, then to my nation, and then to any other engagement, which includes a political party. Being a member of the PDP and participating in all the electoral processes, and I was, more or less the spokesperson of the PDP in 2015 when we had our election. So I've been a major player in the PDP. But the development of Nigeria, the salvation that the Nigerians need, is not vested in a political party any longer. You have people who are members of the PDP, members of the APC, members of all kinds of political parties who support Mr. Peter Obi because it transcends the political party right now. We're trying to save our lives and not save our political parties. That's what we are doing, and that's where Nigeria is now. We cannot continuously, pretend that all is well. And so, or because I'm a member of the PDP, then whoever the PDP's candidate is, then you must support. That's not how democracy plays out in other developed economies. There are members of the Democrats Party who support Republican candidates and vice versa. So it is about the capacity, the capability, the competence of the individual.
If you say there are members of the Democratic Party who support Republicans, they don't vote for Republican candidates.
They do.
While still being
Oh,
members.
yes, they do. They campaign, they support, and mobilize to vote for candidates of a different political party because it, like I said, it transcends your political party. Who is the individual that can deliver to the people? That's what really matters. And that's where we should get to, where we are not blinded by what they call loyalty. And like I tell people, the assumption of loyalty is for those at the bottom of the ladder in the political parties. Most of our big players are loyal to themselves first.
But isn't this part of the deception as well? Because if you are a member of a party and you want to support another candidate,
yes,
why don't you just leave that party and go with the so that the party knows that, look, they're not with us. So they are now with this other party. It's clearer for a lot of people who also want to perhaps say, okay, look, we're planning with this, we're taking that decision based on this. So it puts everybody in the clear of what to expect, isn't it?
But that's why I think our democracy or our politics needs to evolve. I do not have to be in the political party of the candidate I'm voting for. I should be free to make a decision. Like I said, my loyalty is to my conscience, not to my political party. So the individual who I think can deliver on the promises to the Nigerian people is who I'm devoted to, not whoever my political party chooses. Because we know how political party candidates emerge. Sometimes it's not free, sometimes it's not fair, sometimes it's not to the best interest of the people. So that is where we are looking at it from. What is the best for the people, not what is the best for me. It would have been nice to say, oh, as a member of the party, I should support my party's candidate. But will I be punishing my conscience? Will I be happy as an individual that this is not what I really want to do, but because I want to be loyal to my political party that has not helped me or helped the majority of the Nigerian people, then I want to be loyal? No, we cannot do that.
If they say this is about, your conscience, you want to do things right, but you also know that actualizing certain things are two different things. For instance, if you were you're still in PDP, and so if you decided to say, well, I vie for local government elections. You've contested elections before.
Yes.
Wouldn't you make more impact if you contest election and win on that platform, given your mindset and what you believe in, which you say you find in the other candidates, as opposed to just voting for him where it's a 50-50 thing. He may or may not win. So how about that?
The people determine who, at the end of the day, wins the elections. In a normal democratic setting, the people are the ones who vote to determine.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes, so if I support Peter Obi, for example, as a Labour Party presidential candidate, I may have members of the PDP in my state that I support for House of Assembly or for the Senate or for House of Reps. So it's not just about, aligning from top to bottom. It has to be PDP from top to bottom. What is the character of the individual that I'm supporting to that role he's vying for? So if I was to run for office as a local government chairman, the people in that local government will determine who's elected.
I understand that. What I'm asking is, if you look in your party and you say you have a better chance of winning an election as, for instance, a local government chairman, and then rather than do that, you choose to vote for another candidate in another party, do you think that you will be achieving your aim of ensuring development happens in the country by voting that, as opposed to assuming you contest and win an election as a candidate?
Well, if I was to vie for office for a particular position, and your question is, would I rather not vote for a different candidate than to vie for office? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, if you were to vie for office in your party,
yes,
the PDP, and you know you have a better chance to win and make an impact, would you rather vote for another candidate and not go for that election as a councillor and win and make more impact? Which would you prefer?
No, of course. If I'm vying for office, I must be aware, first of all, that I'm capable of delivering on the promises I wish to bequeath to the people. So if I know I have the capacity to do it, why on earth will I vote for somebody else on a different platform? If there's somebody better than me in the ring, then why should I contest?
Now, anybody has the right to vote for any candidate you want.
Yes.
People are free to do that. It doesn't matter whose ox is God on that one. But for you, what is it that you've seen in supporting him in terms of capacity or ability to win an election, given the way our political system is structured here?
Well, to be honest, I think that Nigerians have come to that point where we're tired of the way things have been. Everybody is frustrated and disillusioned, and we cannot continue the way we've always been. Anyone who is taking the Nigerian people for granted, and I say anyone because the leadership, as constituted presently today, in my view, has taken the people for granted. And so Nigerians have gotten to the point where they are tired. They want to make their voices heard like there's never been before. And Peter Obi happened to be the poster boy for today's revolution. If you go on the streets today, wherever you go to, Nigerians are not happy. Look at all the data and the indices. 84% of Nigerians cannot feed themselves. Nigerian students have been out of school since February. The insecurity in Nigeria today is worse than it has ever been before, to the extent that we are now having the presidential convoy being harassed and attacked. It has never happened before. So what sector of the Nigerian economy can we say is doing well today? There's none. So we've gotten to the point where we have few choices to make between the candidate of the APC, the candidate of the PDP, and the candidate of the Labour Party today. And we can see clearly that Nigerians want a change from the way things have always been. And the only person we perceive who has that capacity to deliver on the promise that we have as a people for our future, because we're fighting for our future. Yeah. We're fighting for our lives.
So at the moment, it's such that we don't know how or what's going to play out on the day for the presidential elections. All the polls notwithstanding, with due respect to all the researchers who did their homework and did everything about that one, because if you look at the sample size and all of those things, you know that, you're still in the party, you know that there are so many things that you don't see that determine how elections are won and lost, and not necessarily just with polls, as it were. So for you, is this about the presidential election at that level, or is it across board? Because there will be question marks if the Labour Party is focusing just on that alone.
Well, what we're trying to do is to change the leadership, and leadership at the top.
So just that one?
That is the major factor for 2023. Because how well a country will progress depends on the leadership at the top. and how well a country would, mess up, like we're messing up right now, depends on the leadership at the top. So majority of Nigerians, yes, we care about, those who go to the National Assembly. We care about our governors. We care about local government chairmen. But what signal is the leader at the top sending? That is what transcends down to that leadership ladder. Because if we see that the president is taking a step in the right direction, the National Assembly, the governors, will have no choice to take that step in that direction. For example, a president falls ill and he has a cold, and the next day he's flown to the UK. The governors will say, oh, if I get sick too, I do the same thing. But if a president says that to better the health system in Nigeria, we must invest in our health system, and we must use our health system and lead by example, every other person will follow suit. That is the kind of leadership Nigeria needs right now, and that's what we're bothered about. Yes, the Labour Party and the presidential candidate, Mr. Peter Obi, has shown that he's that kind of a person that will do what he says. We've looked at his records as a governor of Anambra State, and that is what is driving the Nigerian people crazy, that where has this man been all along? We've seen him moving from place to place, country to country, TV station to TV station, telling the people what he intends to do and how he intends to do it. We've never heard that before. That's why you can see that it's more like a revolution for us, because we're seeing a different kind of individual aspire for office, and those who are competing with him are nowhere in any standard to compete with him.
Do you get feedback from your party about this in terms of your stance now?
Chamberlain, I can tell you for a fact that there are hundreds of PDP members still in the PDP who are obedient, because everybody is tired. We want a better life for ourselves and our children. The loyalty now has transcended the political party. But at the elections, you will see it, because they say, oh, the man has no structure. But the narrative is changing now. They're saying that, okay, there are people who are coming out to support him, who were not supporting him, in quotes, at the initial point. We're seeing rallies being held across the country. We're seeing hundreds of thousands of eligible voters come out en masse. So what more structure could be more than that?
Well, if I hear you right, if many or most of those who are really angry, quite a number members of PDP want to support him and vote for him. So if you have a lot more from the PDP and not as much from the APC, again, if I heard you right, wouldn't that be weakening the PDP and strengthening the APC, making it easier for them to just stroll in and win the ticket?
Well, just like it's happening in the PDP, it's happening in the APC, and that's the truth. And it is even worse for the APC, because a lot of APC members, many of who I conversed with, were disappointed at the selection of the running mates of the APC presidential candidate. Many felt that that was unfair, that was unjust, and that was insensitive. And apart from the fact that their candidate doesn't appear to be someone who they think has a capacity to lead Nigeria into her future, they see that now they have even more reasons not to support their presidential candidates. And we're going to see all this play out at the elections. The confusion that the main political parties have is that they are banking on the previous permutations of elections in Nigeria. What will happen in 2023 is like what we've never seen before. And that's the truth. We're seeing for the first time young people go out en masse to register to vote. We're seeing young people fund their own strategy on how to go about the elections. We're seeing young people come out on the street without being paid. Chamberlain, this has never happened before.
But in 2019,
yes,
who did you work for? How did you vote?
I campaigned and voted for the PDP candidates, Atiku Abubakar.
Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi.
And Peter Obi, yes.
So isn't it the same?
No, it's not the same. 2019, we had Presidents Buhari and Atiku on the line. And at the time, Atiku was a man to beat. He was obviously better than what we had at the time. But in 2023, there's a difference. Now we have three major people on the line, and obviously we're choosing the one who's the best. That's what it's about. Yes, I voted and campaigned for Atiku the last time, but that has changed now. We're seeing somebody who's younger, who is more effective, who is more efficient, who is more intellectual, who has the capacity, the commitment, and the honesty to deliver our hopes, and that's why we're for Peter Obi.
Even though you know that there's so many people who would point by point disagree on what you said, but my colleagues in Lagos will also like to come in and get some questions across. Go ahead, guys.
Mr. Sibo, interesting thoughts there, but you, if I get you correctly, you're focused and concentrating on winning the presidency. And, just in case, in the wildest possible scenario, your candidate emerges, has your party thought it through by not, drumming up the same level of support for the victorious emergence of your party at the governorship level in other states? Have you anticipated the kind of presidency that you could have if you don't have the requisite support base at the governorship level and at the National Assembly levels?
Well, thank you for the question. You see, 2023 is going to be very different. When Peter Obi emerges president, that would be Nigeria's president. He would realize, and the nation will realize, that this was a product of the Nigerian people, not just of a political party. And so those at the National Assembly and the governors, of course, they may not be members of the president's political party. Nigerians don't really care about what political party you belong to. Deliver on good governance for us. And if there appears to be some kind of fracas between the National Assembly and the executive when Peter Obi becomes president, Nigerians will rise to the occasion. Because we have fought so hard to have our president elected. Like many people will say, we are the ones running for office through Peter Obi. So it is our government, not just Peter Obi's government. So the Nigerian people would not allow regular, professional politicians destroy whatever we are trying to achieve as a people. So that consciousness will be available across board. When Peter Obi becomes president, his plans and policies are the Nigerian people's plans and policies. So if our friends in National Assembly care about the nation, care about the people who they represent, they are going to fall in line with those plans and policies that are capable of delivering us to where we're headed to. So I don't foresee a scenario where there will be an unnecessary, back and forth, apart from the regular ones where we'll have, because Peter Obi is going to stop, waste. He's not going to allow people to continue the way they've been doing it. And professional politicians will not be happy about it. And that is where Nigerians will rise up to the occasion. If we get to a point where the National Assembly, for example, is becoming a stumbling block to our progress as a nation, the people will react. And when I mean the people will react, they will react in the way that we have never seen before.
So many hurdles to cross before you get to that point. Speaking of which, let's look at the hurdles now. I wonder if you've heard the analysis that, the support base based on algorithms for your candidate is mostly found on social media, and not just on social media, but of people who do not necessarily reside within the country and are not PVC holding eligible electorate. That's one. Two, let's look at the Northwest. Some have also said that this time around, President Muhammadu Buhari is not on the ballot, and that the election will be decided in the Northwest, where you have states like Kano and Kaduna that have swing votes. How confident are you that your candidates can pull a surprise in these states and with these factors?
Thank you. I don't subscribe to the assumption that the election will be decided in the Northwest. I really don't. I don't also subscribe to the assumption of those who are afraid that the support base of Peter Obi is just on social media, or those who are based outside of the country, or those who don't have the PVC. That's fear speaking. That's what it is. They are afraid. They are seeing what we have never seen before in the history of Nigeria. They are seeing Nigerians generally queue behind one person. The same way you're seeing it on the streets, That's the same way you're seeing it on social media. So any person who is telling you is just so, I mean, we've seen rallies across the country of young people, middle-aged people, and old people rallying in support of Peter Obi. Is that social media? Or are we going to assume that they all don't have PVCs? So who are those who have the PVCs then? Who are those who are the Nigerians? So the election for 2023 will be very different. Like I said, whatever permutations we've had before for 2015 and for 2019 will be crushed in 2023. Because the kind of sensitization we are having today, we've never had it before. There are people who have always had voters' cards and never voted, and they're saying that this time around, we are going to vote, and they're voting for a reason. They're not voting to reinforce failure. They're not voting just to change the political party that's in government. They're voting, or they're coming out to vote for an individual. And that is, like I said, we've never seen before. Most people have voted along party lines. President Buhari is now on the ballot today. So the assumption that the APC, has bulk votes somewhere does not exist. And I tell you what are they going to campaign with in the Northwest? What are they going to tell the people in Katsina why they should reinforce failure and vote again for the APC? When those in Katsina are not living better lives, the insecurity in the zone has worsened, poverty in the zone has worsened, education in the zone has worsened. What will be the campaign point of the APC in the Northwest, where some people think that's where the votes will be decided? Are those in the Northwest living better lives than those in the Northeast or those in the Southeast? Nigerians generally are frustrated. We are tired. So anybody's assumption that, this party has these votes here, you are lying to yourselves, because Nigerians are going to show in 2023 that we want a different direction. The same way the northern youths are out of school, that's the same way the southern youths are out of school.
So, but don't you think that when the strike is called off before the elections, it will change the dynamics?
It will not. Are we going to forget suddenly all the sufferings we've had just because they've called off the strike?
No, it's not about what they forget. It's about where there will be the capacity or ability to vote.
Calling off the strike is not going to change anything.
Okay. What do you think about the way Osun elections turned out? Because at the time, too, Nigerians were very angry. Osun, they were also equally angry.
Yes.
But in spite of that, over 300,000 people voted for the APC, even though PDP won with 50,000 votes. So you had that much people, in spite of the anger, still voted for the ruling party. So if you extrapolate that to the national level, you never can tell. So it means that anger may not necessarily be a major factor.
Anger will always play a role. The same way hunger will play a role.
But will it be the major deciding factor?
It is going to be a combination of factors, and many people did not assume or did not foresee that the Osun government was going to change from the APC to the PDP, because we saw the way the APC had mobilized their men and materials. We saw the way they were excited about the Ekiti elections. They were going to use monies, but monies didn't play so much role in Osun elections. The people were decisive. They knew that they needed to change those who were in government, and they came out en masse to do it. Yes, they were frustrated at some point, but they were decisive that this is what we want, and that's how it's going to be in the 2023 elections.
Well, you didn't factor in the fact that even the APC themselves had internal rift and rancor, which may have contributed to all of that. So it's not as straightforward as, it may appear.
But are they not having the same rancor right now? Are they not in a worse situation right now than they've ever been before? Well, there are members of the APC who are senior members of the APC who are campaigning against the APC.
We know to go, but we'll get the APC and the PDP to weigh in as well on this matter tomorrow. But I want to thank you for coming on. Ogwede Ifaluyi Isibo is the Director of Mobilization, Nigeria Diaspora Youth Coalition, who he says now identifying with the Labour Party presidential candidate, Mr. Peter Obi. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. All right, we've got some emails from you out there. Well, this one comes from Gerald, who is talking about a better Nigeria. He says, the saddest part of this call for a better Nigeria is that everyone in Nigeria seems to ignore the best and fastest route to achieve it. That route is getting the local government system to work. I repeat, getting the local government system to work. I think Ayo can identify with you on that one. He goes on to say, one man called the president of Nigeria, can do very little to change Nigeria. Only when the local government system starts working effectively with annual budgets, that will have a good country.
Can we take that email like 3 times? But maybe just for now. That one will suffice. This one is from Ogunloja Olayinka talking about food price inflation. To stop the problem, or rather to solve the problem of food price inflation in Nigeria and become a major food exporter, the government should make all graduates of agriculture-related disciplines practice their trade during their 1-year NYSC. State governments are to make land available with conducive hostels on such land with appropriate facilities, all materials made available to the core members, an acre allocated to each of them to farm a particular crop or rear a particular breed with clear mandate and target given, with some motivation on shared proceeds at an encouraging percentage, strictly monitored by a committee that may still have some measure of patriotism driving them. Do this across the 36 states of the Federation and see what happens after a period of 3 years. Let all the presidential candidates take this step. Blueprint.
Looks like a proposal.
Abi?
Okay, let's take this one from Festus Kimbuiwa. He says, FG may not be able to stop inflation from rising because it is caused mainly by global factors, insecurity, and rising energy prices. But government can, I believe that's a count, can act and should act to ease the pain on Nigerians. Helping low earners and poor Nigerians must be the priority of the federal government and state government.
Well, Professor Imohena says states and federal governments must synergize on the concurrent policy to utilize our 84 million hectares of arable land to produce food for our population. Let's learn from Holland, making over $150 billion from agricultural products. This Nigeria's 6 years national budget, he says.
And Pastor Law Afacross says, in a highly populated climate like ours, it will be near impossible to improve the economy and lives without local sourcing of raw materials for massive production of goods and services. Local industries have to be adequately supported.
And for local industries to be adequately supported, according to Dr. Okengo, the 3 things to do is food production, more food production, and more food production. I hope those who should listen are listening. Thank you for watching on Sunrise Daily today. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
It's the beginning of a new week. Let's make the best of it for the nation. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.
And I am Chamberlain Oso. Goodbye.